Hey guys, day two. I hope that day one went okay for you. I know that there might have been some frustrations, and it's going to be kind of a learning curve for us. And I apologize if I was a part of the bump in the road for you today at all. I'm sorry. I hope to be able to kind of keep refining my process and making it, work for you, and make it clear enough that there won't be any stress involved. But if there is anything that comes up, please let me know. A few of you shot me questions today, and I hope to answer those quickly and efficiently for you so that you don't have to feel too much stress at all. Um, One of the things I did want to clear up for you is that I do actually still want to collect your group projects that you guys were working on before we went on this break. Um, Basically, I'm not planning on giving you any new work on or any new information on Friday. I'm going to actually give that day for you to kind of finish up whatever work you have left to do in the project. And then by next Monday, April 6th, I'm going to want you to be able to send that to me. One person from your group emailing me what it is you guys compiled and the work that you did would be great. I just want to be able to give you credit for the work that you've been doing. And we want to kind of, you know, put a period on the work that we were doing on the Americas prior to this big shift that we've undertaken. If you have any questions about the project and any of that, please let me know. Email, comments, whatever it takes. I'll give you a few more directions as the days get nearer, but on Friday I won't be giving you any new information, just a chance to kind of finish up any of that you have left to do. For us, we're on to day two of early Japan. Eventually, we'll be talking about Korea, but right now we're just talking about Japan. And today, if we have time, I'm just going to walk you through basically four eras of Japanese history. If it starts to get around 10 minutes or so, and I've only made it through two, I'll probably call it a day, and we'll just pick up with the other two tomorrow. So I'll try to keep an eye on the clock as we're going here, not to take too much of your time. So there's these four periods that we want to get into. You might remember yesterday we talked about the settlement of the Yamamoto Plain and how the Yamamoto clan kind of came and rose to prominence. And what we want to do now is kind of see what happens next. Phase one for us is what's called the Nara period. And what's going to eventually happen on this Yamamoto plain with the various clans vying for power is that despite the fact that the Yamamoto emperor, the son of heaven, as we'll come to find, will remain in place, the power will start to shift away from the Yamamoto clan towards the Fujiwara clan. And that's going to make some significant changes in their culture. One of the changes that they make is that they're going to shift the capital towards a place called Nara. So obviously why it's called the Nara period. This is going to happen about 710. Just to be clear, we're talking about 710 AD here. So the emperor is still kind of working with that semi-divine status, calling himself son of heaven. The Yamamoto family still has power because they are the emperors, but the Fujiwara clan has come to be pretty prominent. But the prominence of these clans, that's going to erode the central government. Remember, yesterday we talked about how the Yamamoto clan tried to centralize the government. They even borrowed from Chinese ideas on how to do that. And that's just going to basically, in the end, prove to be too much. They are not going to be able to accomplish that goal. And so the aristocratic families are going to maintain their control of the tax system and the land. And that's eventually going to weaken the central government considerably because they're not going to have access to tax revenue. And central governments need taxes. It's kind of too bad, but it's true. Central governments need taxes to be able to function and to have any measure of power whatsoever. And so the Nara period sees this kind of eroding of the central government because of that lack of access to the land and to the taxes. What's eventually going to happen then is it's going to see us shift towards the Heian period. Now I know you can't see the bottom right of the PowerPoints here because of the picture-in-picture that's going on. But remember, I've posted the PowerPoints for you, so you'll be able to see them in their entirety elsewhere. So don't fret too much. But during this Heian period, we're going to see another shift. The location of the capital is going to change yet again. Really, not too long later, within the same century, in 794, we're going to move to Heian Kyo, which is near what is today Kyoto. And this shift is going to see really kind of the erosion of all those reforms that Shotoku Taishi had tried to implement. All that effort at putting the central governments in charge is going to kind of fall apart, and the power is going to end up falling to the local aristocrats. Now, this is an interesting time period, and I think some of you might find this time period the most fascinating if you were to kind of get into it a little bit, because these local aristocrats are going to be vying for power against one another and wanting to protect their own property and protect their people. So what ends up developing then during this era, the Heian period, is a class of warriors who would be faithful to protecting the aristocrats and their land and their people. And this set of warriors are very famous. They're called the samurai. Samurai is a word that means those that serve, and I'm sure that you can picture them in your mind. Maybe you've seen a movie or two that has samurai culture prominent in it. I don't know, off the top of my head, there was one about 15 years back called The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise. They're not all great movies, but they're, the samurai culture is very interesting to many people. The samurai are maybe analogous to European knights, analogous in several ways. One of them is the way they fight, horseback and armor and multiple weapons. They had skill in swordsmanship and with bow and arrow and various other kinds of weapons too, and they had their own kind of armor. So we can see similarities there with the European knights. But another, perhaps maybe even more important similarity is they function to what's called the Bushido Code. It's kind of like chivalry. In Europe, they had a chivalry code where knights had to abide by certain standards of honor, and for the samurai, honor was also very, very important. So we can see yet another sort of similarity. Europe and Japan are not interacting during this time period, but they are developing in similar trajectories towards feudalism, where an aristocrat has the land and the people get access to the land by giving loyalty to the aristocrat. The aristocrat repays them by protecting them through a military force. And in the Japanese case, that's the samurai. So that's happening during the Heian period. Now, it's going to be a few hundred years of that, aristocrats vying for power and various samurai helping to protect, whatever power they gain. But by the time we get to the 1100s, this constant civil war is sort of wearing on the people of Japan. And what's going to end up happening is one particular person is going to rise to the surface there. Minamoto Yoritomo is going to be able to set up his own kind of control of the situation. He's going to set up shop near Tokyo, what is today Tokyo. And what he's going to end up doing is interesting. He's going to have a central government, that there's still going to be an emperor, but the emperor is not really going to be directly governing. What ends up happening is what's called a shogunate, and this era is actually called the Kamakura shogunate. A shogun is like a general. A shogun is like a general who has power over, daily decisions and has the military at his disposal. So while the emperor is in place, the shogun is really kind of running the show, so to speak. And this particular shogunate is going to last from 1192 to 1333. It's one of the more famous eras of the shogunate, in part because it's during this time period that Japan was invaded. Japan, being an island nation, had protected it from invasion from time to time, but here they're going to be invaded by the Mongols, especially the famous Kublai Khan. And in 1274, Kublai Khan is going to come across with a force of Mongols, but especially Chinese and Korean troops. And they were almost unopposed as they landed. Despite the fact that the shogun was a military leader, the Kamakura shogunate was not ready for this invasion, and um, they really were saved by kind of a freak storm, a typhoon that rose up and sank the fleet that the Mongols had off the coast of Japan, and that really saved the Japanese from a worse fate during this invasion. But all these wars are actually going to eventually kind of erode the Kamakura shogunate, and there's going to be a move towards another era of destabilization. It's going to be another collapse of central rule. Um, the aristocratic families are going to regain power. These families had never been completely lost, and in this case, they're going to have a shift in name. They're going to be called daimyo, which means great names. You know, families whose names invoked power, that had reputation, had sway. And the daimyo are going to be utilizing the samurai for protection, just as the eras that preceded it. And the daimyo are also going to be kind of creating these coalitions with other families. And what ends up happening is these coalitions build and build, and they end up warring with one another. And this actually deteriorates into a disastrous civil war, very famous civil war in Japanese history called the Onin War. Destructive enough that even the capital of Kyoto was destroyed during this time period. So this civil war and these samurais fighting now into the 1400s, it's destructive. And it's interesting because we would normally think of Japan as a very peaceful, slow-paced kind of culture in the era that we're talking about. But what we've been saying is almost constant warfare as people vied for power. So it seems that no culture is completely safe from that kind of problem, whether it's Europe or the Americas that we've studied, or China and now Japan. Warfare has been a constant problem in world history.